On a highway in Northern Virginia, a brazen daytime shooting of employees from the Central Intelligence Agency stunned the country. The FBI were called in, but the nationwide search quickly became a far-reaching international manhunt. Agents hoped that after years of investigation, a daring operation halfway around the world would put an end to the global pursuit.
In Langley, Virginia, a terrorist fired into rush hour traffic. The victims seemed randomly selected, but the motive appeared to be political, targeting employees of the Central Intelligence Agency. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI quickly became involved in the investigation, processing more than 2,000 leads and crossing an ocean in the effort to deliver justice.
Langley, Virginia, a suburb of Washington, D.C., is home to the headquarters of the Central Intelligence Agency. Monday, January 25th, 1993. Another work week had started for thousands of CIA employees who routinely commute to their jobs at America's Global Intelligence Agency. Workers of varying security clearance and experience waited at the long light to turn left into the CIA compound. All were alone in their cars, except a young couple who had met at the CIA and had recently been married. As newlyweds, they seemed to have their entire life ahead of them. Then the young man was struck from behind by a gunman's bullet. Two employees behind the shooter fled from their vehicles as the man walked forward. A third employee sped off before he could fire. Two more ran the red light as their cars were peppered by bullets. The gunman then shot into a sixth car, hitting the 61-year-old man twice at point-blank range. Behind that car, the shooter realized the first man he shot was still alive. He aimed at the wounded man, this time killing him, but sparing his wife. Only one other employee remained, frozen by fear. The 66-year-old was killed instantly by two quick shots. After the young woman heard the killer speed off, she ran for safety. Dozens of urgent 911 calls flooded the switchboard in Fairfax County, Virginia. All available units were ordered to respond. Emergency personnel from several towns raced to save those that clung to life. Fairfax County Detective Fred Fife is assigned as lead detective.
One of the first steps was to make sure that the scene itself was safe. We weren't sure what type of individuals we may have been dealing with, so we had to set up an armed security around the scene to prevent, a further attack.
Choppers searched for the fugitive from overhead. Several motorists reported seeing him flee into the surrounding woods after he drove off. The CIA immediately dispatched its tactical security forces to comb the 250-acre compound in and around headquarters. An exhaustive search turned up nothing. Authorities secured a 3-mile radius and closed busy Route 123 except to emergency personnel. At the crime scene, police found 2 dead and 3 critically wounded. 4 others escaped unharmed, 3 of them women. FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett arrived moments after the shooting.
The first thing you do when you walk into a crime scene is, what's the obvious? Well, the obvious is this appears to be directed towards the CIA. It might be directed towards the individuals that were shot. But it was clearly somebody wanted to make a public statement during the rush hour traffic.
The victims were rushed to area hospitals as investigators began to interview the survivors. Their first step was to alert the public and area law enforcement to the description of the fugitive and his vehicle. But most witnesses saw little, and their accounts varied.
The witnesses stated that the suspect was a male, mostly olive-complected type individual, armed with a rifle. And that was pretty much the composite description we were able to put together. Height varied. The vehicle ranged from being a brown station wagon to a blue truck. I think a lot of the people were in a panic situation and were shielding themselves from being victims.
One woman got a closer look than most. She described the shooter as a man with dark hair in his early 30s, wearing a tan jacket and dark pants. Though he had her in his sights, for some reason, he chose not to shoot.
We looked at the individuals that were killed, and we said, could there be a connection? Had they done something in the past that someone could have wanted to take revenge on them for whatever reason, whether it be personal or professional, because you got to look at this both ways.
The immediate crime scene covered an area of 50 square yards. Glass and shell casings littered the roadway. Forensic technicians needed to record every detail before the bodies of the two slain victims could be removed from their cars, according to Fairfax County crime scene detective Jeff Miller.
I have a duty to them, and my duty is I have to be their voice. They've been murdered. Here's this person who's silent forever, and somebody has to speak up for them. And so that's the way I look at it, is I'm their voice. And it's my job to find whatever it is that's going to help us find or identify the person who's responsible for this.
Crime scene investigators recovered 10 empty shell casings. They believe they were likely fired from an AK-47. Towards the back of the cars, where the gunman began firing, technicians also recovered one live round.
The forensic evidence always tells the truth. It's never clouded by someone's perception. It never lies to you. It's always telling the truth. And it's my job to find it. All I have to do is find it. And once I find it, and I'm able to examine it, it's going to tell me exactly what happened.
The live round on the ground told investigators that the weapon was a semi-automatic and had most likely jammed before the killer fired his first round. Noting the location of the casings in relation to the shattered glass enabled the team to determine the trajectories and order of the gunman's bullets. Investigators also gathered glass samples from each of the vehicle's broken windows. They hoped the combination of several types of glass found in the same location would prove significant.
You had a number of different cars. Each of the cars was a different manufacturer. It had a German car, had an American car, had a Swedish car. The glass that's put in these cars is all different. If some of this glass had spattered back on the shooter, even though it was microscopic, someone who had these three different kinds of glass on their clothing, that might be probative of the investigation.
While investigators continued to gather evidence at the crime scene, agents and detectives visited nearby hospitals to speak to the remaining survivors. The young woman who had lost her husband in the assault hadn't seen much since she hid below the dashboard most of the time. She said that the man could have shot her at any moment, but like the previous female survivor, he turned away instead of firing. She also told investigators that she and her husband normally used a different entrance to drive into the CIA compound.
My husband.
FBI agent Brad Garrett wondered who else might have known this.
know what was going on.
We immediately started looking at who within the CIA, in other words, disgruntled employees, present employees, that may have had a relationship with these people that could have retaliated for whatever reason. There's a lot of bizarre people that have applied to work for the CIA, and they've rejected a lot of people.
At the Fairfax County Command Center, the female witness who had gotten the best look at the gunman worked with a police sketch artist.
Swear.
Based on her description, investigators believe the suspect was of Hispanic or Middle Eastern background. She had not gotten as good a look at his vehicle, but recalled that it was a station wagon. Investigators released the drawings to the public, hoping to elicit leads.
One of the first things we had to do was to get out through the media that afternoon a phone number or a system where the potential witnesses that had been in that area that morning could contact us. And we needed to isolate a phone number for that purpose and get it out to the media as quickly as possible.
As calls poured in, agents and detectives were still grappling to find a clear motive for the shooting. If they could deduce a reason for the shooter's actions, it would limit the potential suspect pool. Agents searched the victims' backgrounds for possibilities as to why they may have been targeted.
He then walked up to this car and fired one more shot into car H.
Once we started looking at the backgrounds of the individuals that were shot, and we looked at the circumstances as to why they were at that intersection, it didn't appear, at least to me, that there probably was a link between them being shot, those particular individuals being shot, and the person or persons that shot them.
Just 8 hours after the shooting, Fairfax County Detective Jeff Miller examined the cartridges recovered from the pavement at the crime scene. He confirmed the shells were from an AK-47 assault rifle, a weapon used primarily by Russian and Chinese armies. Upon closer inspection, Detective Miller discovered a latent fingerprint on the shell.
The difficult part about this whole situation was cartridge casing is a cylindrical shape. The fingerprint went about 300 degrees almost all the way around this cartridge case. So what I had to do was photograph it in different steps. I'd photograph it, then I would turn it about 1/16 of an inch, adjust the light so that it was exactly the same, and photograph it again. And then I would continue to do that over and over so that I had photographed the entire circumference of the cartridge casing.
The hour-long process yielded one complete fingerprint. It was investigators' first solid lead. Detectives fed the print into a system that was connected to 185 other databases throughout North America.
We could take that one latent fingerprint and send it to any automated fingerprint system in North America and ask them to search their database to see if that fingerprint was on file or was recorded within any of their automated systems.
Unfortunately, the extensive search provided no match.
Print it out?
Yeah.
Either the suspect had no record, or he had not committed any crimes within North America. The next morning, police looked for witnesses among area commuters on Route 123 who may have seen something unusual the morning of the attack. They handed out flyers with a sketch of the suspect to 3,000 motorists. Intense media attention generated sightings from across the country. None immediately panned out, but the reports were maintained in the command center's growing database. Through the night, patrols on the roads around Northern Virginia and the Washington, D.C. area remained on high alert. That evening, a car fitting the description of the suspects was pulled over by a Virginia state trooper. The trooper called for backup, then approached the vehicle.
Sir, stay
He had no idea if he had the shooter or if the man was carrying an AK-47. On January 26, 1993, 36 hours after a lone gunman opened fire with an AK-47 in front of CIA headquarters, killing 2 and wounding 3 others, Virginia state troopers stopped a vehicle that fit the description of the suspect's car.
Put your hands up. Keep your hands up.
The killer had been described vaguely as having an olive complexion, medium build, and dark hair.
Okay, buddy, we've been looking for you.
Though the man troopers stopped also fit that description, a fingerprint check confirmed he was not the fugitive.
Okay, then we have,
By now, dozens of personnel from the CIA, ATF, and the FBI had joined Fairfax County Detective Fred Fife's team in pursuit of the murderer.
As additional manpower was needed for different areas, they were brought in and supplemented us. The FBI was very generous. They supplied us not only with the hard technology, the computers and so forth, but their clerical staff to maintain the information management system that we had designed, that we felt we could process the leads as they were coming in.
FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett was concerned that despite recovering a fingerprint from a shell casing at the crime scene, investigators were still unable to identify the perpetrator or his motive. All they knew for sure was that the gunman used an AK-47.
So I made this decision. I said, let's go back and look at all the AK-47s purchased in the last year. And the reason we did that was that typically people who commit these kind of acts buy their weapons a short time or acquire their weapons a short time before they commit the act.
Over the next several days, ATF agents visited gun shops in the Virginia and Maryland area outside of Washington, D.C., since the purchase or possession of firearms is forbidden within city limits. They discovered that 1,000 AK-47s were purchased in Northern Virginia over the past year. Another 600 had been purchased in Maryland. Agents gathered records of every purchase and entered the gun owners' names into the command center's large computer database. At firing ranges within 100 miles of CIA headquarters, agents also questioned gun owners directly.
We're investigating the shootings near the CIA headquarters.
They asked if they remembered anyone in the past year who matched the suspect's description and had practiced with an AK-47. They remembered no one. By February 1st, a week after the shooting, investigators hoped their growing database of witness descriptions and gun purchases could provide a common link among the thousands of names and police reports entered so far. Agents and detectives set parameters for the database to cross-reference the suspect's physical characteristics with those who made a recent purchase of an AK-47 and who had a local address. The computer returned one name, 28-year-old Mir Emal Kanzi. He had purchased an AK-47 3 days before the shooting. He was a Pakistani immigrant who lived in Herndon, Virginia, and was reported missing 3 days after the shooting by his roommate. Investigators immediately dispatched a team of agents to track down Mir Emal Kanzi. Kanzi was not at home, but the roommate who reported him missing worked at nearby Dulles International Airport. Kanzi's roommate, also a Pakistani immigrant, was employed by a security company to operate a magnetometer that checked passengers for weapons.
Agent Johnson? Any question him?
Okay.
Come, please? Yes, sir.
He told the FBI that he hadn't seen Kanzi for several days.
Set up an interview sometime soon. No, sir. Okay.
He said he was unable to talk at length since he was on duty, but would meet agents later at his apartment in Herndon, Virginia to answer all their questions.
If anything comes up, just give me a call. Okay, sir.
The roommate added that he was scheduled to fly back to Pakistan later in the week, but would cooperate with authorities until then. When investigators arrived to question the roommate again, he wasn't there. They soon discovered that the roommate had changed his travel plans.
A lot of the plans and commitments that he had told the FBI agent and the detective on Sunday had started to change. He gave a notice at his apartment that he was going to be leaving on Tuesday instead of Thursday. He switched a flight to Pakistan back to Tuesday. That was the first opportunity he would have to fly out of the country. We started finding all this information. He shut his utilities off at his apartment. In other words, he was preparing to leave the United States in a big hurry.
With less than 24 hours until the roommate's flight departed, agents maintained constant surveillance, hoping to catch the roommate or Kanzi at home.
What's up?
Their perseverance paid off. They found the roommate alone at home.
So, what happened yesterday?
There were few items in the apartment.
Mind if I look in the bedroom? No, no problem.
It appeared that both Kanzi and the roommate were not planning to return. The man didn't know where Kanzi was now, but consented to allow the investigators to search what was left in the barren apartment. In a suitcase stored in the bedroom, agents discovered a Beretta and Makarov automatic pistols, ammunition for an AK-47, and a bulletproof vest.
About 10 years. About 10 years. I don't know anything about that. No, sir.
The roommate denied any knowledge of the weapons and claimed that the suitcase belonged to
I
Kanzi.
didn't know anything about what he carries or what I don't watch.
Investigators continued to search the apartment. Under a couch wrapped in plastic, they found another gun.
I don't talk to him. I don't even have a conversation. He just pays the rent.
It was an AK-47, the same type of weapon used to kill 2 and wound 3 in front of CIA headquarters. The roommate said he didn't know the weapon was there and added that he had only met Kanzi a few months earlier when Kanzi had first moved in.
The roommate told us that Mr. Kanzi initially came to him through another Pakistani because Mr. Kanzi was looking for a place to live. The roommate said, fine, you can live with me, and they set an amount of money for Mr. Kanzi to live with him.
It's not mine.
They hoped the FBI lab could confirm forensically that they had found the murder weapon.
Never seen that before in my life.
But for now, their prime suspect, Mir Amal Kanzi, was still unaccounted for. By February 8, 1993, 2 weeks had passed since a lone gunman opened fire with an AK-47 in front of CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, killing 2 CIA employees and wounding 3 others. The FBI, ATF, and Fairfax County Police believed 28-year-old Mir Amal Kanzi, a Pakistani immigrant, was their prime suspect. At Kanzi's apartment in Herndon, Virginia, investigators continued their search where they had found an AK-47, the same type of weapon used in the CIA shootings.
I don't like the guy anyway.
Kanzi was missing, and his Pakistani roommate, who was scheduled to return to Pakistan the following day, had no idea where Kanzi was now, according to FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett.
The roommate told us that he really didn't spend much time with Mr. Kanzi. The roommate worked 2 jobs, Mr. Kanzi worked a job. They would occasionally go to the mosque together to pray, but that their interactions with each other were very limited. They were in the apartment many times at different times of the day when the other one was gone.
Hoping to assail investigators' suspicions of him, the roommate signed his consent to assist with the investigation. In a closet, investigators found a tan field jacket similar to the one witnesses had described worn by the shooter.
In fact, I've seen him.
The roommate told him the coat belonged to Kanzi. Outside the apartment, the roommate pointed out Kanzi's vehicle parked at the curb, a small pickup truck. Officers confirmed it was registered to the suspect.
Yeah, we've got a
Inside, they spotted a map that was open to the CIA headquarters area in Langley, Virginia.
Okay, look at that.
Close by, they also saw a clipping about the CIA director. Agents would need to secure a warrant before they could conduct a more thorough search. If this was the vehicle used by the killer, witnesses' descriptions of the car at the shooting had been wrong. Though the roommate had cooperated with investigators, Fairfax County Detective Fred Fife wasn't going to take any chances.
We knew Mr. Kanzi's roommate was planning on leaving the United States because he had purchased airline tickets for a flight out of the United States, which was one way. He was not planning on returning. He was deemed a material witness to the investigation and subsequently taken into custody and held based on his abilities to flee the United States.
At police headquarters, investigators continued to question Kanzi's roommate.
He might do something violent. It was the night that
He told them Kanzi had worked as a messenger for a local courier service since August of 1992. 6 months earlier, in February 1992, Kanzi had received political asylum and a work permit from the Immigration and Naturalization Service.
We were fortunate in this case that we had Mr. Kanzi's prints because he had no criminal record in the United States, but the Immigration Service here in the U.S. had fingerprinted him at one point because he had asked for asylum here in the United States. So they had a fingerprint card that we were able to get from them.
Lab technicians were called in to process the forensic evidence through the night as the roommate told investigators more about Kanzi.
Directed against the American.
He said Kanzi was usually quiet. But when he watched television news reports, he became enraged at how Muslims were being treated during conflicts in Bosnia, Iraq, and Israel. That's when Kanzi vowed to take action.
The roommate eventually admitted that Mr. Kanzi had told him that he was going to go do something big. And we asked him to define big, and he said, well, I'm not sure, but maybe a shooting of some sort. And he mentioned going and doing something big at the CIA, the White House, or the Israeli embassy.
Agents believe the roommate was not connected with the shootings. But he was not permitted to leave the country until the investigation was complete. Lab examiners compared the fingerprint lifted from the shell casing found at the shooting to Kanzi's fingerprint on file at the INS. They matched. Investigators also confirmed that the serial number of the weapon recovered in the apartment matched the serial number of the Chinese-made AK-47 purchased by Kanzi 3 days before the CIA killings. Kanzi had presented 2 forms of ID for a Virginia State Police background check, and the purchase had been approved within minutes. FBI lab examiners then compared bullets and shell casings test-fired through Kanzi's AK-47 with the bullets and shell casings collected from the crime scene by Fairfax detective Jeff Miller.
The firearms examiner was able to say that the bullets at the crime scene were fired from the gun that was collected from Kanzi's apartment. He was also able to examine the cartridge casings that he test-fired at the laboratory from the AK-47 and compare them to the cartridge casings that I collected at the crime scene. And he was able to say that the cartridge casings at the crime scene were in fact fired from the same weapon.
Technicians next examined the field jacket seized from Kanzi's apartment closet. If this was the same coat witnesses had seen the shooter wearing when he fired point blank into their vehicles, tiny shards of glass would be embedded in its material.
You had glass from a German car, glass from a Swedish car, glass from an American car, and if he had all 3 of those types of glass in his clothing or on his shoes, then that would be pretty obvious that he was, if not there, at least he was near the scene when it happened, because he's got all this glass on him. They were able to find glass particles in his clothing that matched the type of glass that came from all of the vehicles at the scene.
Investigators had enough evidence to charge Mir Emal Kanzi with capital murder and malicious wounding. The FBI also filed charges of flight to avoid prosecution and offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to Kanzi's capture. Agents fanned out to interview members of the Washington area Pakistani community. They were looking for Kanzi's friends, acquaintances, or anyone who had come into contact with him.
FBI. I'm looking for
We
you.
learned that Mr. Kanzi had gone to a market in Herndon, Virginia, and the individual who ran the market had a connection at a travel agency. And we learned through this individual that Mr. Kanzi had come to him on the afternoon of the 25th, the day of the shooting, and bought a one-way ticket to Pakistan.
The manager said that Kanzi had only one suitcase and needed a ride to the airport, so the manager drove Kanzi there himself.
If you see him again or hear
Agents
from him,
confirmed
give me
that
a call.
Kanzi boarded a flight to Quetta, Pakistan, a city less than 80 miles from the Afghanistan border. 2 weeks after the shooting spree at the CIA headquarters, a worldwide manhunt for the killer got underway. The investigation would begin 8,000 miles away from the crime scene in the Muslim nation of Pakistan. In February 1993, 32-year-old Pakistani Mir Emal Kanzi was wanted by the FBI for killing 2 and wounding 3 CIA employees on the highway outside CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. 2 weeks after the shooting, agents learned that on January 25th, Kanzi had boarded a one-way flight to Quetta, Pakistan, a city less than 80 miles from the Afghanistan border. By now, he could be anywhere. Finding the fugitive halfway around the world presented overwhelming problems for FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett.
One of the difficulties in investigating any case overseas is that, first of all, you have no jurisdiction to begin with. You're just another citizen, a U.S. citizen traveling to a foreign country. So the key in catching any fugitive, obviously, is developing intelligence information. And you do that typically through informants.
The FBI turned to DEA Supervisory Special Agent Gregory Lee for help. Since Pakistan had been a major source country of heroin and hashish, the DEA already had established many reliable contacts and informants over the previous 10 years. At the time of the investigation, Agent Lee was the resident agent in charge of the DEA's office in Karachi, Pakistan.
Well, the working environment there is a complete contrast to what an FBI agent would be used to working domestically in the United States. And it's like you literally fell out of a tree and then showed up at a place that is foreign to him in every way, to include the language, the infrastructure, how to get around, who to see. We could provide him with protection, with weapons, with anything he needed to help conduct his investigation.
In a country of 135 million people that was politically volatile and had rampant corruption among officials, the FBI would need all the help it could get. Agent Garrett also realized that Kanzi would have many sympathetic supporters who could hide him in Pakistan or even in neighboring Afghanistan.
He would be respected in Afghanistan. In fact, he was respected in Pakistan. The CIA, in particular, and the U.S. government in general, is not well liked in either one of those countries. And as a result, people didn't want to give you information about him, because they thought what he did was, in some people's words, heroic.
In March of 1993, the U.S. State Department declared Kanzi's alleged attack on CIA employees an act of terrorism and raised the reward for information leading to his capture to $2 million. With the groundwork established, Agent Garrett boarded a 21-hour flight to Karachi, Pakistan. When he landed, DEA agents had already arranged for him to meet his first contact. Agents distributed pamphlets and matchbooks with Kanzi's photo, publicizing the $2 million reward in English, Arabic, and Punjabi.
these things to as many people as possible.
The reward generated leads from as far away as Thailand and London. But informants in Pakistan claimed Kanzi was hiding among the small border towns and tribes in Afghanistan.
Find out what else we can.
Kanzi's family originally was from Afghanistan. Their family roots go back to Afghanistan. And keep in mind that the city that Kanzi is from, Quetta, Pakistan, is only about 80 miles from Afghanistan. And so the natural link between Kanzi, Quetta, family heritage, and Afghanistan made sense.
Agents traveled to Kanzi's large family home in Quetta and interviewed his brothers who were wealthy landowners. They confirmed that he had visited them back in January, a few days after the shooting in Virginia. Kanzi arrived unannounced, carrying only one small bag. That was unusual, considering the length of the trip from the U.S. The brothers also thought it was odd that Kanzi was wearing no coat, since winter in Pakistan was then at its coldest. Kanzi only stayed for a few days, then left as quickly as he'd arrived. He didn't tell them where he was going, and they hadn't heard from him since.
Not very long, just enough to...
A few weeks later, the brothers became aware that their brother Amal was a wanted terrorist from reports on CNN.
Give you our card.
Agents
do that
believed it
for
was
us?
likely that Kanzi had disappeared over the nearby border into Afghanistan.
We knew that it would be safer for him in Afghanistan because, by and large, Afghanistan, particularly back then, is a country that's just basically a bunch of tribes that control different parts of Afghanistan. At that particular time, really had no central government that had control of Afghanistan. So it's like, who would you even go to ask permission to come into Afghanistan?
The investigation had hit a dead end. Agents returned from Pakistan without the fugitive. Kanzi's trail went cold for the next 3 years, so the State Department raised the reward for information leading to his capture to $3.5 million. While Agent Garrett waited in Washington for the reward money to flush out a viable informant, he spent time with FBI fingerprint experts. Since so much time had passed, he needed to learn how to recognize Kanzi through his fingerprints in order to be certain they had the right man if he was arrested in a remote location. The agent studied the unique ridges and grooves of each one of Kanzi's 10 fingerprints that he'd given the INS years earlier.
I see that.
He was also taught how to fingerprint a resisting suspect under field conditions.
This is a case that obviously took a large chunk of my life to work on, you know, and I guess one of my fears might be that we never would catch him, you know, and which is entirely possible.
In April 1997, after 4 years of pursuit, an FBI agent at the U.S. consulate in Karachi, Pakistan, received a call from one of their more reliable sources. The man claimed he had information on Kanzi's whereabouts, but the informant didn't want to say more over the phone.
All right.
He told the agent to wait in a
You want
public
the Irish
place
people?
and that a second man would contact him on his cell phone in an hour. The crowded streets of Karachi would provide ample cover. If the wrong people saw the informant talking to an American agent, he would certainly be killed. As instructed, the agent waited on the street for the call. The agent hoped his contact would have viable information that would finally lead the FBI to Kanzi. The informant claimed he not only knew where Kanzi was, but that he could put the fugitive in a specific hotel at a certain time to enable his arrest. The informant represented a group of Kanzi's protectors who decided the reward money was too great to pass up. The highest levels of the U.S. government were involved. The White House approved a secret arrest plan. The Secretary of State then secured permission from the Pakistani leader for U.S. agents to carry out the operation.
Pakistan is very sensitive to their image. They're very proud people. They don't like the idea of a Pakistani being identified as an international terrorist, somebody who would travel halfway around the world to Washington for the purpose of killing CIA employees. To them, he's an embarrassment.
Gentlemen, welcome.
Agents arrived in Pakistan with a special ops team from the FBI training facility in Quantico, Virginia.
Just exactly what our intelligence.
They would need to extract Kanzi from a hotel room in a remote desert town in north-central Pakistan, where their informant promised he'd be.
Getting his fingerprint is going to be key.
Gentlemen, let me direct
Each member would be assigned a task based on a surveillance report of the hotel's layout. Agents secured a room across from the hotel where the informant claimed Kanzi would be staying. They had no way to independently confirm if Kanzi was there. All they had was the informant's word. The informant told investigators that Kanzi's room was on an upper floor.
All right, let's do that. That's great.
Based on the informant's description of the interior layout, agents would have to first secure the lobby and then the stairwell before they could enter Kanzi's room. The informant added that the hotel did not lock its front door and had no security guard.
Show us where the person.
We took that information, we developed an arrest plan, how we were going to enter the room, who was going to do hall security, what we were going to do once we were in the room. Because it's extremely important when you do arrest scenarios that everyone know exactly where they're going and what they're supposed to do.
Each had their assignments. Once they secured the lobby and stairwell, the front agent would coax the fugitive out of his room by calling for morning prayer. They put on body armor and checked their weapons. To hide their paraphernalia, they wore shalwar kamises, traditional Pakistani clothing, over their Western garb. On June 15, 1997, the operation to arrest Mir Emal Kanzi went into action. The team arrived at 4 a.m., figuring there'd be fewer people on the street at that early hour. But when they tried to enter the hotel, they found the front door was locked.
We can't get in. So here's 4 Americans dressed up in Pakistani garb standing out, at 4:05 in the morning outside this hotel. Clearly the anxiety was, off the charts because of where you were. It's almost like you're in a dream a little bit. It's like this is surreal.
To make matters worse, the street was filled with people who likely noticed that the Americans were clearly out of place.
We didn't realize that this particular location was extremely hot in the summer. So people started to work at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So the street was full of people. So it's another thing that we didn't calculate for.
The informant had been wrong about the locked door. After 4.5 years of pursuing Kanzi, the FBI had hit another obstacle. On June 15, 1997, an FBI arrest team disguised in Pakistani garb attempted to gain entry to a locked hotel in north-central Pakistan where they believed suspected terrorist Mir Emal Kanzi was hiding. But to FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett, it appeared that their informant had misled the team.
When we went up to the hotel, and the initial intelligence was that the door would be unlocked and there'd be no security guard, and we get there and the door is locked, and then within a few minutes we realized that there is a security guard there.
Agents summoned the guard and pushed their way into the hotel. The team secured the lobby and moved quickly up the stairs. They hoped the informant had been correct about Kanzi's room number, if the fugitive was in fact there at all. When everyone was in place, the front agent knocked on the door and called for morning prayer to coax out whoever was on the other side of the door. If Kanzi was inside, he may be armed. Agents prepared for the worst. The door cracked open, and the agents pushed forward. The man put up a struggle and began to scream. He had to be gagged so others in the hotel would not be awakened.
I tell him, after he calms down a little bit, that if I take the gag off, will you promise not to yell anymore? And he said yes. So we take the gag off. He doesn't yell anymore. I ask him his name. He says an obscenity to me in English. He didn't look like his picture. He gained weight. And I said, you know, I'm not sure if this is the right guy.
The agent hoped the man's fingerprint would match prints Kanzi had provided for the INS 6 years earlier.
Okay, guys.
He inked the suspect's thumb and compared it to Kanzi's known thumbprint.
What are you?
The prints matched. After more than 4 years and 8,000 miles, the FBI finally had suspected terrorist Mir Emal Kanzi in custody. But their mission was by no means complete. Not only did they have to get Kanzi and themselves out of the hotel safely, but also out of Pakistan altogether. DEA Supervisory Special Agent Gregory Lee assisted the FBI with logistical support in Pakistan.
You've got a guy in custody now, and you're in a foreign land. You're about 8,000 miles from home. You're out in what's essentially the high desert that would be Death Valley here. And you're trying to get this guy from Pakistan back to the United States.
Americans holding a Pakistani citizen captive in his own country is dangerous. Agents drove the international fugitive to a waiting helicopter and flew him to Islamabad, where permission for extradition was granted the next day. FBI headquarters in Washington was informed with a code phrase: "The package has been delivered." The arrest team flew Kanzi out of Pakistan on an Air Force plane. To avoid landing in a foreign country, the plane was refueled in mid-air, so Kanzi could not ask for asylum before facing justice in the United States. During the 21-hour non-stop flight, Kanzi confided that he'd been in Afghanistan for almost the entire 4 years while he was on the run. He also claimed responsibility for the shooting in front of CIA headquarters. As a political statement against the CIA of the United States, he had decided to kill workers before they pulled into the heavily guarded entrance. He explained that he didn't shoot any women because Islam forbids it. He said that after the shooting, he was surprised that he was still alive. So he drove to a nearby park, went to lunch, then bought a plane ticket to Pakistan.
I said, well, why did you quit shooting? Because you told us earlier that you had all this ammunition on you and that we had found all this ammunition in your apartment. And he said that he ran out of people to shoot.
Affirming that his statement had been given freely and willingly, Kanzi signed his confession. After arriving in the U.S., a chopper transported the prisoner to a secure location. Under heavy security, agents delivered Kanzi to the Fairfax County Police to face the murder and assault charges. Fairfax County Detective Jeff Miller remembers that day.
Having him captured and brought back to the United States showed to the whole rest of the world that the United States, the FBI, the Central Intelligence Agency, is not going to just let this sort of thing lie and not do something about it. No matter how long it takes, no matter where these kinds of people may hide, the United States is going to do their very best to try and track these people down and bring them back to justice.
Kanzi was found guilty of murder, malicious shooting, and using a firearm in the commission of a felony. He was sentenced to death and is scheduled for execution in 2002. In the wake of the shootings, memorials to the slain victims were established on Highway 123, where they fell to the gunman's bullets. The CIA tightened its security at the Langley compound and at all of its offices around the world. The successful investigation would prove to be another in the long line of battles against terrorism. In the fall of 1995, a serial killer was on the loose. Crossing the country, he lured women with his charm and then struck. Each time, he vanished before police could catch him. The FBI and police detectives needed to stop him before another victim met this deadly stranger.
The body of a young woman found burned in a truck launched a manhunt to find her killer. When more bodies began to turn up across the country, the FBI believed the cases were linked. Investigators had a suspect. They just couldn't find him. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents would enlist the help of local law enforcement and even long-haul truckers to stop a cross-country killer.
In the early morning hours of September 29, 1995, the Los Angeles Fire Department responded to a vehicle fire at a hospital in Van Nuys. They found a pickup truck burning in the parking lot. When the flames were extinguished, they found human remains. Firemen contacted the Arson and Homicide Division of the Los Angeles Police Department. Homicide detectives responded to the scene and were briefed by uniformed officers already there. They questioned a witness, a nurse who had seen the fire start. She said she had arrived for work before dawn for the early morning shift. In the parking lot, she saw the truck go ablaze. She saw the outline of a figure with long hair run from the truck as the flames erupted. She never saw a face. And she had never seen the truck before. Investigators inspected the vehicle. The pattern of fire damage indicated it had begun in the cab and had burned very quickly. Investigators believed it had been intentionally set. An accelerant had been used, probably gasoline. The body inside appeared to be a female, but it was burned beyond recognition. Some items survived the fire, including a backpack, a camera, and a roll of undeveloped film. Technicians recovered several documents that bore the name Sandra Gallagher. By sunrise, detectives at LAPD's Van Nuys station had run the truck's plates.
Okay, I'll call back.
Through DMV records, Detective Mike Koblenz was able to confirm that Sandra Gallagher owned the truck.
We'd done some work at the office and learned that she was in fact married to an individual, Steve, who lived in the Los Angeles area. We attempted to contact him and made arrangements to interview him at Van Nuys Station.
Detectives suspected it was Sandra in the truck, but identification through dental records would take a few days.
I have some things I'd like you to look at. See if you can tell me if they recognize.
Since the body was too damaged to identify, detectives asked Stephen Gallagher to look through the recovered evidence. He said the backpack, camera, and other items were Sandra's. The police department had developed a roll of film which survived the fire.
Wife and somebody.
Stephen identified his wife in the pictures. Most married homicide victims are killed by their husbands.
We were having a few problems.
Detectives asked Stephen about his relationship with Sandra.
There's a lot of domestic violence, spousal abuse that goes on, so it's just a direction to go to initially. In our case, as it related to Sandra Gallagher, once again, we wanted to eliminate the husband as a suspect and determine a little bit more about our victim, Sandra.
Stephen said he had seen his wife on September 28th, the day before the truck fire.
Exciting's been happening. What about you?
60 hours.
That day, the couple had met for lunch.
My brother may be getting a promotion. He's going to get
He
a
and
raise.
Sandra were experiencing marital problems, and they had spent the last couple of nights apart.
He should know, I would say, week after next.
They had talked about reconciling,
Who's that guy I saw at the bar with the other night? The big guy in the leather jacket?
but things were still strained between them.
It's none of your business, okay?
Stephen told detectives he last saw Sandra around 2 p.m., though he heard from his wife later that evening.
He split apart for a bit. Still trying to work things.
He said Sandra called him from a local bar called McRed's.
I know.
She was very excited and told him she had won $1,200 in the lottery.
I was over my brother's.
Since that call, Stephen hadn't heard from his wife and had no idea where she had gone.
There were a few other people.
Detectives had to corroborate his story.
Once he mentioned the bar McRed's, that was our direction. We wanted to get in there, find out who was the bartender, who the owner was, who was there that particular evening, and who could identify some photos of Sandra that we gathered from the truck.
LAPD detectives visited the bar. When shown a photo of Sandra Gallagher, the bartender recognized the woman.
Okay. What can you tell me about her?
She knew her by her nickname, Sam.
Had a lottery ticket. Hey. Guess what?
The bartender confirmed that Sandra had been in the bar on the night of the 28th. She had told everyone about her lottery win.
Yeah.
Some customers overheard the detectives' questions and said they had also been in McRed's that
Can
evening.
you tell me about her when she was in here the other night?
They also remembered Sandra and recalled one man who talked with her that night.
These people in the bar had mentioned to us that they recognized the photographs, and they identified the photographs as a female by the name of Sam. This is the name that they knew her by, was Sam. And everybody had mentioned she was with a person by the name of Glenn.
Yeah.
They described Glenn as having long blonde hair and a beard. He'd been coming in regularly for the past few days. That night, he seemed interested in Sandra and talked to her for quite a while.
Okay.
Glenn was friendly and came across as a big spender, buying drinks for Sandra and the others. When the bar closed, Glenn had asked Sandra for a ride home.
That's a big hint. I think we gotta get out of here.
He said he lived nearby. She agreed to drop him off, and they left together. The customers hadn't seen Glenn since that night.
Yeah, she took him home.
Do you know where he lives?
It was about 5 minutes.
They believed Glenn's last name was Rogers, but they weren't sure. Their description of him matched the one of the man seen fleeing the burning truck.
If you think of anything else, please call me.
Detective Koblenz would check the lead.
Thank you.
Through department sources, we're able to identify Glenn Rogers as a resident in the Van Nuys area. And we're able to obtain photographs of Mr. Rogers. These photographs, in the next day or two, were shown to various witnesses at the bar in the form of a photo lineup. And Mr. Rogers was identified in this photo lineup as the person being at McRed's with Sandra Gallagher.
Detectives secured a search warrant for Rogers' apartment. It was only a few minutes away from where the truck had been burned.
LAPD, search warrant.
They didn't know if Rogers was inside, perhaps with a weapon. Uniformed officers entered first to clear the apartment.
Talk with me.
Rogers wasn't there.
Come on.
It looked like Rogers had cleared out in a hurry. Detectives recovered a purse and a woman's wallet. It was empty of cash and held no ID.
No identification.
They also found a woman's earring.
The earring became significant in that her husband, Steve Gallagher, identified that earring as one that he had purchased as a pair for his wife a couple months earlier.
After several days, the coroner made his report. He positively identified the remains from the truck as those of Sandra Gallagher. He determined that she had not burned to death.
We learned in the nose area of our victim there wasn't any presence of evidence of fire, sooting, and so on. That gave us information that because she didn't breathe any of the fire, any of the soot, it gave us an indication that she had died prior to the fire itself.
The mother of three had been killed by manual strangulation. Los Angeles detectives charged Glenn Rogers with Sandra Gallagher's murder and issued a warrant for his arrest. They entered Rogers' name and description into the NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, a database that links over 57,000 law enforcement agencies nationwide.
That informs other agencies around the United States that Glenn Rogers, in this case, is in fact wanted in Los Angeles for murder. It would list the agency, Los Angeles Police Department, Van Nuys area, with my name and my phone number. If they have any contact with Glenn Rogers and happen to run him, this warrant would show up in their jurisdiction and he'd be taken into custody.
Detectives sought out anyone who knew Glenn Rogers. They learned he frequented local bars and worked odd jobs, mostly in construction. They visited several job sites, interviewing his friends and co-workers.
Through witnesses and friends, we learned that Glenn did have a temper, and that when he drank, he did become enraged. There was domestic violence involved with former girlfriends. So we knew we were dealing with someone who could become violent, and generally violent when he drank, as it was in our case with Sandra Gallagher.
One of his friends said he hadn't seen Rogers in a while, but promised to contact the police if he heard from him.
Okay.
A few days later, Rogers' friend called. He said Rogers had phoned him from a motel outside Jackson, Mississippi. Local police talked to the motel manager, who told them Rogers' room number.
Police, open up!
The room was empty. The murder suspect was on the run. In the fall of 1995, the search continued for Glenn Rogers. Police believed he fled California after killing a woman there on September 28th. A tip led to a Mississippi motel, but Rogers had disappeared before police arrived. Police issued an APB locally. They hoped someone would spot the suspected killer before he left the area. Days later, on November 3rd, 1995, Jackson, Mississippi detectives responded to a murder. Family members had found Linda Price dead in her bathtub. The 34-year-old single mother had been stabbed repeatedly and her throat had been slashed. Investigators searched the apartment for evidence. Technicians photographed the scene and lifted numerous latent fingerprints. They found no murder weapon. No valuables seemed to be missing. There was no apparent forced entry, and the killer had locked the door when leaving. The details of the crime scene led Jackson homicide detectives to conclude Linda Price had been killed by someone she knew. In the morning, they interviewed her mother. Perhaps she knew the killer as well. She said her daughter had a new boyfriend. His name was Glenn Rogers. A month earlier, on October 3rd, Linda had met Rogers at the Mississippi State Fair where he had been working. He was charming, and Linda fell for him right away.
That's pretty close, huh?
They soon rented an apartment and moved in together. At first, Linda seemed happier than ever, but recently she wondered if she'd made a mistake. She told her mother that Rogers had a bad temper and she feared his mood swings. When Linda stopped calling and didn't answer her apartment door, her mother believed that Rogers had harmed her. Again, Rogers was nowhere to be found. Jackson detectives believed he had left the area. They entered his name into the NCIC database. Learning Rogers was wanted for murder in California, they contacted Detective Mike Koblenz in Los Angeles.
Jackson, Mississippi at that time contacted me, informed me of a murder they had, and they wanted more information on Glenn Rogers as he was a possible perpetrator in that case.
The murders followed a pattern. The victims in California and Mississippi had both been charmed by Rogers. They had been isolated from others, then brutally killed just before Rogers fled the area. The investigators believed that Rogers was on a rampage that probably would not stop until he was found.
In our minds, we knew that we had a major problem going on here. We felt if he wasn't apprehended, that there could very well be more victims.
Jackson police asked the public to call if anyone saw Rogers in the area. Witnesses reported sightings, but Rogers stayed one step ahead of authorities. The detectives contacted the FBI field office in Jackson.
Hey, got you these pictures from the crime scene. I think we're gonna find
They believed Rogers had left the state like he did after the California killing. Agents filed a federal warrant for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Perhaps federal resources could help stop the killer. FBI Special Agent John Huber helped coordinate the multi-state investigation.
This case was very high speed, very fast. The murder he committed in Jackson was on November 3rd. It was Linda Price. Subsequent to that, he committed another murder on November 6th.
On that date, police in Tampa, Florida responded to a murder scene at a local motel room that had been rented by Glenn Rogers. Like Linda Price, the young woman lay dead in the bathtub, stabbed in the back, chest, and wrist. There was no ID of the woman in the room, but investigators noted a tattoo of a cross on her shoulder. Her jeans and shoes were piled near the toilet. A bracelet was found in the sink. From the evidence left behind, Tampa homicide detective Julie Masucci attempted to piece together the details of the murder.
When we removed the clothing, it appeared that she had been stabbed through the clothing, which means that she was never undressed. And it was from the rear portion, which appeared that someone might have come up behind her and stabbed her.
The shoes had blood spots on the top, indicating she had them on and was standing when she was attacked. Under her body was a man's watch. Investigators believed it belonged to the killer.
It was significant that she was placed in a bathtub and that it appeared that someone tried to clean up any evidence that they left behind. We had found towels to indicate someone had wiped up blood off of a floor. It appeared that the bathtub water had been run to try and clean up any evidence that was left behind.
The detective interviewed the housekeeper who discovered the body. That morning, she had been making her daily rounds just after checkout time. Outside room 119, she spotted a handwritten "Do Not Disturb" sign.
Housekeeping!
She said she didn't clean the room the day before because she saw the sign and wanted to respect the privacy of the people staying there. On this day, the occupants were scheduled to have checked out. When she entered the bathroom, she made the gruesome discovery. Detectives asked the motel manager if she knew about the people staying in room 119. She recalled the man who rented the room because he requested a "Do Not Disturb" sign the day before.
They told him he didn't have one. So he paid for another night and told them at the registration that he did not want them cleaning his room. He wanted it to be left alone. Apparently he went back to the room and tore off a piece of a phone book and made his own "Do Not Disturb" sign, and he hung it on the door.
The motel manager remembered the same man packing up a small white car that evening. He had paid for another night, so she didn't think he was leaving. She warned him about recent break-ins at the motel and told him not to leave anything in the car overnight.
Thanks. Good, I'll go.
The detectives checked the office records, finding the registration card for room 119. It had Glenn Rogers' name and signature on it. Technicians would later recover prints matching Rogers from the card. Detective Masucci ran a computer check and saw the California and Mississippi murder warrants. She contacted the other agencies and the FBI.
Then we started to realize very quickly into the investigation that there was a possibility that this man, Mr. Glenn Rogers, was a serial killer.
The investigators knew who the killer was, but Tampa detectives still had not identified the female victim. She remained at the morgue as Jane Doe. If they could identify her, it might help them find the man who had killed her and at least 2 others. In the fall of 1995, after linking murders in California, Mississippi, and Florida to one man, the FBI and local detectives searched for accused serial killer Glenn Rogers. The latest victim had been found in a Tampa motel room. She was still unidentified. Responding to media coverage, a woman whose daughter had been missing for 2 days came forward. She positively identified the body of her daughter, Tina Marie Cribbs. Tina had 2 children of her own. Tina's mother told Detective Julie Masucci about her daughter's last day.
We learned that Tina had worked and that she went to the Showtime bar, which is in Gibsonton, and she met some friends there. She was supposed to meet her mother there. Apparently it's like a family bar where a lot of people go and there's televisions in there and they just go and gather and talk.
Detectives visited the Showtime bar. The bartender said she knew Tina and her mother. She confirmed that Tina had been in the bar on November 5th. The bartender also remembered that a man named Glenn was there the same night.
How you nice ladies doing?
He talked with Tina and the others.
Let me do it for you, let a good time roll. You want bartender?
He bought a round of drinks with a $100 bill. The bartender said the man was very friendly and won Tina over quickly.
She started talking to a gentleman that was...
Eventually, he asked Tina for a ride home. He said his motel room was close and promised Tina would be back in time to meet her mother.
Everything's taken care of, right? All right, great, thanks.
Tina finally agreed and told the others she'd be right back.
When the mother came to the Showtime bar, she sat there and waited, and her daughter didn't show up. So she said she started beeping her to find out where she was. And she said that she had such a close-knit relationship with her daughter that she immediately knew something was wrong when she didn't answer her pages.
Detective Masucci also learned that Tina owned a white Ford Festiva, the same kind of car the Tampa motel manager had seen Rogers packing with suitcases. She updated the NCIC report on Rogers, adding the Festiva and its license plate number to the fugitive's information. FBI Special Agent John Huber was surprised that Rogers wasn't trying to conceal himself.
Glenn Rogers seemed to not care if he would get caught or had no fear of the law. He would always use his real name when dealing with people and checking into motels. He would drive cars that weren't stolen, either belonged to the victim, which he could easily be linked to, or his own vehicle. He didn't seem to care. If people knew what was happening, he wasn't trying to hide.
The search for the serial killer hit the news. TV stations across the Southeast broadcast pictures of Rogers, asking anyone spotting him to call authorities. Hundreds of leads poured into the FBI. One promising tip came from a Jackson, Mississippi motel. Two separate callers claimed to have seen Rogers there. Rogers had been in Jackson previously and was known to frequent small motels.
We set up a perimeter around the hotel, and then we had an entry team go up to the door.
Police, come to the door! Come to the door with your hands up! Come to the door! Hands where we can see them! Get your hands off!
Agents were cautious until they could identify the man.
Put that on the wall! Where is it? Hands on the wall.
We identified the person that resembled Rogers and determined that it was not him. We then later searched the entire hotel and began searching the hotels in the immediate vicinity, but didn't find him. It was very important in this case to apprehend this individual as soon as possible, because based on his history, he was going to continue to kill until he was apprehended.
Authorities were desperate to stop him. The serial killer was out there somewhere, and it was likely that he was searching for his next victim. In the fall of 1995, suspected serial killer Glenn Rogers had been last seen in Florida. The FBI believed he had murdered a woman there after killing women in California and Mississippi. The FBI soon learned that Louisiana had been his next stop. On November 10, 1995, Andy Sutton, the mother of four, was found murdered in her Bossier City, Louisiana apartment.
Bruises on her legs.
Like two others, she had multiple stab wounds to her upper body and back.
So,
The Bossier City detective questioned the victim's roommate and former boyfriend.
9 o'clock.
Was anyone present?
Andy's roommate was a waitress and had worked late the night before Andy was killed.
Went in together.
When she returned home in the early morning hours, she heard the bedroom door close. She assumed it was Andy and her new boyfriend, Glenn Rogers, in the apartment's one bedroom. Blankets had been left on the couch, and so she slept there. After daybreak, she was awakened by someone at the apartment door.
Would you tell Andy I'm here?
It was Andy's ex-boyfriend.
No, that's all right. I'm here now. I'd like to see Andy.
He wanted to talk to Andy.
I don't care. I'd still like to see him.
Stay there. Andy? Andy?
In the room, she found Andy's body under the sheet. She told detectives Andy had met Glenn Rogers in a bar. They had been dating for only a few days. Neighbors had seen Rogers leave in a white Festiva. Bossier City detectives ran Rogers' name through the NCIC and saw the 3 other murder warrants. They contacted the other police agencies and the FBI.
Hey, detective. Who's that fax for?
Los Angeles faxed a photo of Rogers to be used in the local investigation. Louisiana television stations picked up the story. Viewers were asked to be on the lookout for Rogers, but they were warned not to approach the deadly fugitive. Special Agent John Huber and the other investigators were frustrated.
Yeah, you know it.
Rogers was killing people faster than we could investigate where he was. It was just a kind of a time game, and he was killing people faster than we could apprehend him.
The FBI and local detectives believed Rogers murdered 4 women in 6 weeks. After each killing, Rogers had fled the state.
Let's try to focus.
The locations he chose were random.
Let's try to focus in over here.
Despite their best efforts, investigators couldn't keep up. They needed to spread the description of Rogers and his vehicle across the country.
Let's start off with
Agents sent requests to truckers over their CBs to be on the lookout for a white Ford Festiva. They posted wanted flyers in truck stops and rest areas.
we're not really sure where he's going to be going next. That's why
They held press
below here is
conferences to get
photographs
Rogers' photo
of
out to the public.
suspects. And Gallagher will pass some of this out.
They wanted to warn
Right now,
potential
what we know
victims
is,
and hoped someone would spot the killer.
we have already.
Through the media, agents released details of Rogers' MO for finding victims and the route he traveled.
Gallagher was viciously raped and murdered.
The FBI
Set
began
on
the
fire
process
on
of adding Rogers to their 10 most wanted list.
1996, at the rear of a convalescent.
Getting someone on the 10 most wanted list increases the amount of resources that the Bureau puts into a case. It also increases the amount of media attention that's also worked into a case.
The tips began to increase. One caller claimed Glenn Rogers was at a pool hall in Mississippi. 2 agents responded. One of the pitfalls of an intense media campaign are the many false sightings that well-intentioned citizens call in.
Well, gentlemen, Special Agent Huber.
The man in the bar was obviously not Rogers.
What's going on here? You have ID?
The investigators tried to predict Rogers' next move and focus their search. Special Agent Huber had worked plenty of fugitive cases.
A lot of times in fugitive investigations, when people are in trouble, they'll go to areas that they're familiar with, or associates or friends. In this particular case, Rogers' family and friends were mostly located in the Kentucky area, and that's where a lot of our resources were focused.
Authorities in Kentucky received priority teletypes about the fugitive. Kentucky State Police Detective Bob Stevens was already familiar with the name Glenn Rogers. In fact, he'd been looking for him for almost 2 years. Rogers was wanted for questioning in the disappearance and possible murder of his housemate, 71-year-old Mark Peters. Almost 2 years before Glenn Rogers' cross-country crime spree began, his brother had called the Kentucky State Police.
Yeah, glad you're here.
The body had been found inside his family's cabin. Police believed it was Mark Peters. Peters had last been seen with Rogers. The cord tied around the corpse's hands and feet matched one found in the home the men shared. Authorities could not determine the cause of death, and they couldn't find Rogers.
1029 on it, please. The case is still ongoing and still pending. We had one suspect, which was Glenn Rogers. We weren't able to track Rogers real well due to the fact that he traveled by Greyhound bus, by tractor trailer, cars. It was hard for us to track him. So we had a hard time trying to know where his next step was.
Still, the investigative focus in Kentucky paid off. On November 13th, 1995, Glenn Rogers visited one of his relatives in Lee County, Kentucky. When he left, she called the Kentucky State Police.
Hi, I think you're looking for my nephew. Glenn Rogers.
She said he was driving a small white car heading west toward Interstate 75. When Detective Stevens heard that Rogers was sighted nearby, he set up on the road he believed Rogers would take to I-75. It wasn't long before a white Ford Festiva drove by. The detective began following.
I wanted to make sure that this was Glenn Rogers, not somebody else that I had actually followed in behind. So I pulled out behind this car. When I ran the car tags actually came back stolen. So I began to follow him. I was able to get up, pull up beside him like I was going to pass him. When I looked over, I could see who it was, and the picture I had of Glenn Rogers matched the driver.
The detective requested backup. A local police officer was parked nearby. He joined the slow pursuit. They followed Rogers for a distance.
I think he was kind of watching me, and I was watching him. And I think by then he must have pretty much figured out that he had a police officer behind him. So we pulled up to a stoplight, and he ran the stoplight and pretty much ran some people off the road as he was going through the stoplight. I fell in behind him at that time and activated my emergency equipment.
Rogers didn't stop. He sped up.
He's on to us now. Stand by.
Several miles ahead, police set up a roadblock and tried to clear the road of traffic.
Go, go!
They hoped this would be the last stop for the elusive killer. On November 13th, 1995, Kentucky State Police set up a roadblock in an effort to apprehend suspected serial killer Glenn Rogers. Armed officers waited at the roadblock.
Shoot his tires! Shoot his tires!
They fired at his tires, but they didn't stop the killer. Detective Bob Stevens was close behind.
We followed him down the road. He had run several cars off the highway, ran a school bus off the highway. He was driving on the wrong side of the highway. And so it was determined that he had to be stopped. Sergeant Barnes was able to get up the other side of him. And when he came back, he tapped him, spun him out of the highway, off the highway into a ditch.
They didn't know if the fugitive was armed.
When I first approached the car, and I was one of the first ones to approach the car, you could see that he looked very upset, very aggravated that he was in the custody. He was very defiant and just didn't want to be taken into custody at that time.
After a 2-month killing spree that spanned the country and left 4 women dead, Glenn Rogers was finally in custody. The vehicle identification number of the white Festiva confirmed the car belonged to Tina Marie Cribbs, the victim in Florida. Technicians scoured the car for evidence. They found shorts with blood on them, a blanket, and a woman's purse. These and other items linked Rogers to the murders in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Florida.
Tell me a little bit about what you guys have.
The FBI served as the clearinghouse for the evidence. FBI agents and detectives from 5 states met in Kentucky to outline the case. Special Agent John Huber helped plan the meeting.
What they did do was put together all the information that everyone had, share information, and also that the FBI laboratory would process all the evidence in this case so that one agency would have custody of all the evidence and do the analysis.
Agents and detectives agreed that their best case against Rogers was in Florida. Tampa detective Julie Masucci met with detectives and prosecutors to review the evidence. They believe the watch found in the tub with the victim belonged to Rogers. A photograph of Rogers with Mississippi victim Linda Price revealed he wore that type of watch. Detective Masucci was confident in her case due to the physical evidence implicating Rogers.
We had Tina Cribb's car that he was apprehended in. We had some shorts that belonged to him that had some of Tina Cribb's DNA on them. The registration slip that Mr. Rogers signed himself. Fingerprints that were found inside of motel room number 119, where the victim was found. And miscellaneous items that were found inside of the car when he was apprehended.
On July 11th, 1997, almost 2 years after the murder of Tina Marie Cribbs in a Tampa motel room, Glenn Rogers was convicted of first-degree murder and later sentenced to death in Florida. 2 years later, Rogers was extradited to Los Angeles to stand trial for the strangulation death of Sandra Gallagher, whose body was burned in a truck fire.
She poured over the victim's body and in the cab of the truck. He was seen...
Prosecutors outlined the victim's final hours for the jury. They showed that Sandra and Glenn Rogers left McRed's bar together on September 28, 1995. At some point, there was a struggle, perhaps as Rogers made an unwanted sexual advance. He strangled her, crushing her windpipe. Attempting to destroy evidence, Rogers doused Sandra's body in the truck with gasoline and set it ablaze. Then he ran. On July 16, 1999, a jury again found Glenn Rogers guilty of murder. He was sentenced to a second death penalty in the state of California. Los Angeles detective Mike Koblenz was impressed by the nationwide partnership of everyone involved in the hunt for Rogers.
That's really what made this case come together, was the interagency cooperation, and not just in Los Angeles, but in Jackson, Mississippi, Tampa, Florida, and later Bossier City, Louisiana, the FBI, the press, the different news agencies that were able to get the information out. We truly worked together on this, and it came to a successful conclusion down the road.
Since Glenn Rogers already had 2 death sentences, Louisiana and Mississippi prosecutors decided to spare the families of the victims emotional trials. Glenn Rogers left at least 11 children without mothers. The importance of stopping him was clear to Detective Julie Masucci and the other investigators.
As a woman, not as a detective, not as a police officer, but as a female, I think that there should be a lot of women that feel safe that he's off of the streets. He had no regard for human life. He had no regard for the feelings of the families that are left behind, he didn't care. And I'm happy that he's behind bars, and I'm happy that he'll never step foot outside of a prison system that he could put other females at risk.
Investigators suspect Rogers is responsible for more unsolved murders. He told family members during his rampage that he had killed dozens. Authorities continue to pursue those unsolved murders to close the cases that can be linked to Glenn Rogers. In the Pacific Northwest, tragedy would forever bind 3 women who would never meet. One disappeared just months before her wedding. Another vanished, leaving 2 children behind. A third survived her night of terror and spoke for the others she never knew. The hunt for a serial killer led FBI agents cross-country as they followed his deadly trail.
The disappearance of young women triggered a search that spanned the Pacific Northwest. Even a massive media campaign failed to locate the drifter who first charmed, then killed them. As investigators followed his trail, he always stayed one step ahead. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. In a case that landed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, agents hoped that the one victim the killer spared would help put him behind bars.
March 28th, 1987. LaRon Crouston left a party in the suburbs of Tacoma, Washington at 4 in the morning. He was looking forward to a day of fishing.
Come with me.
LaRon's fiancée, 22-year-old Robin Smith, decided to stay. She was having a good time. Robin assured LaRon she'd be fine.
I love you.
I love you too.
She would just get a ride home from someone she'd met at the party. After fishing all day Saturday, LaRon fell asleep, exhausted. He didn't wake up until early Sunday afternoon.
Robin!
He hadn't seen his fiancée, Robin, since the party 2 days earlier.
Robin!
Concerned, the young man called Robin's mother.
Hello?
Yeah.
Edna Smith had assumed her daughter was with LaRon.
No, let me check. Just a minute. Robin?
She checked to see if Robin was in her old bedroom.
Robin? No, I haven't seen her.
Perhaps she'd come in late without being heard. LaRon told Edna not to worry.
Okay, I'll be there in a few
Maybe
minutes.
Robin
all right?
had decided to spend the rest of the weekend at their friend's house.
Hello?
About an hour later, LaRon and Robin's brother arrived at the apartment.
No one there.
I don't guess we have any choice.
With no sign of Robin, her family decided to call police. LaRon joined the Smiths at their house to wait for detectives from the Pierce County Sheriff's Office. They were all worried. Robin had never done anything like this before. They described Robin as a happy young woman, though quiet. She worked long hours as a waitress, saving most of her money to help pay for her upcoming wedding. Detective Terry Wilson and his partner initiated an investigation.
Per information we received from her mother, Miss Smith, it was unlike Robin to have just walked up and taken off. She was engaged to get married. She was close to her family. And every time she ever went any place her family was, she usually told them where she was going to be at. And so this was unlike her.
LaRon Crouston told detectives about the last night he'd seen Robin. Early in the morning of March 28th, Robin and LaRon hung out at a bar until it closed at 2 a.m. Some people they had met during the evening invited them to an after-hours party at their nearby apartment. The place was rented by Elizabeth Glynn and Darren D. O'Neill. LaRon and Robin were having such a good time they didn't want it to end. The last place LaRon had seen Robin was at the party.
Before you got to the dinner, what time did you?
Detective Wilson went to the duplex where the party had been held. He found Elizabeth Glynn at home. She corroborated LaRon's story and told the detective that she had intended to drive Robin home. But as the night wore on, her plans changed. Darren seemed more interested in Robin, so Elizabeth remained in the kitchen and flirted with a man named Mike Prohoda. Elizabeth told the detective that she and Prohoda had made plans to meet later at his apartment, where they could be alone. Prohoda left the party first to avoid arousing Darren's suspicions. By daybreak, Darren D. O'Neill hardly seemed to notice. He was wrapped up telling Robin about his favorite author, Louis L'Amour, who wrote stories about the Wild West. O'Neill was unemployed and talked about living off the land like the outdoorsman in L'Amour's books. Elizabeth had heard it all before. At about 8 a.m., she left the apartment to meet Prohoda. She told O'Neill and Robin she was going out to buy more beer. When she returned 24 hours later, O'Neill and Robin were gone. Elizabeth pointed out that she found several items missing from the apartment.
In searching the apartment, we found that there was a television that had been pulled out and the television electrical cord had been removed. There was a couple of lamps from his girlfriend had told us that had extension cords on it. These were missing. A lot of his clothes were gone, and she specifically mentioned that there was a blanket that also was missing from the house.
Is this yours?
In a file box, Wilson also found Social Security cards with several different aliases. They included the unusual name of Zebulon McCranahan. When Detective Wilson told his partner what he'd learned, Detective Walt Stout immediately suspected foul play.
Robin was left alone with Darren O'Neill, and something happened at that residence after that. It would be speculation that maybe Darren tried to come on to her physically or sexually. She may have rejected that, or there was something that happened there, and I believe she was probably assaulted in that house.
Detective's next question, Dennis Morrison, O'Neill's friend and former employer. Morrison said O'Neill had worked for him as a carpenter.
When's the last time you saw him? It was last night, yeah, before alone.
He said he had seen O'Neill just a few days earlier. It was Saturday afternoon, the day after the all-night party.
Running kind of low on cash, man. You ain't got about 30 bucks I can get
O'Neill stopped by to ask for traveling money. He said he was heading east over the Cascade Mountains. Morrison had no cash to give him. O'Neill was about to leave when Morrison realized he could write him a check. He went to O'Neill's car to make the offer. His friend seemed nervous and anxious to leave. Then a movement in the back of the car caught Morrison's eye. It looked like something was pushing against the back seat from inside the trunk. O'Neill told him it was his dog. He put it there to punish it. Before Morrison could say another word, O'Neill pulled away. Morrison described the car as a tan Chrysler with Montana tags. Authorities knew they were 3 days behind O'Neill. By now, he could be anywhere. Detectives continued to pursue the handful of O'Neill's known contacts in the area. They called Gary Skinner, the owner of another cabinet shop where O'Neill had worked part-time. He told detectives he had been looking for Darren O'Neill since his last day at work.
When Darren left, he apparently took a hammer with him from the shop because it was missing, and Mr. Skinner couldn't account for it having been taken in any other way.
With no leads pointing to his whereabouts, Pierce County detectives hoped O'Neill's past would provide some answers. A background check revealed that the suspect was no stranger to trouble.
He had warrants out for him. He had been in trouble in Colorado. He had been accused of sexual assault, physical assault. All of his victims that we were aware of had been females. So a profile of him was starting to form that we was looking for a person who is possibly predatory in nature, but violent for sure.
Pierce County deputies entered everything they knew about Darren D. O'Neill into the National Crime Information Database, the NCIC, a listing of criminals and victims nationwide. They included his physical characteristics, a description of his tattoos, and the make and model of his car. If O'Neill were picked up by any police department in the country, Pierce County would be notified immediately. Detectives also helped Robin's family launch a media campaign to locate the missing woman. Robin's picture was posted all over the Tacoma, Washington area, along with O'Neill's. The campaign began to generate leads. O'Neill was spotted entering a local hospital alone on March 29th.
There was no security at the hospital, but the ER nurses were nervous at this man's presence. So they did call a couple of male employees of the hospital, and Darren ultimately left without receiving any treatment for some scratches that were visible.
Investigators believed Robin had inflicted the scratches on O'Neill's face when he attacked her. The hospital staff told police that the scruffy man bore a teardrop tattoo at the corner of one eye. The letters J-U-N-E were tattooed across the knuckles of one hand. Detectives learned that June was the name of O'Neill's ex-wife. The media campaign continued to generate leads. A highway flagman had seen O'Neill in his car at 2 different locations on March 30th, 2 days after Robin's disappearance. The first sighting was on a highway construction site east of Tacoma.
Construction, just keep it slow.
O'Neill was heading south when the flagman waved him through.
Keep it slow, sir.
He also saw O'Neill a few hours later at a gas station off the same highway.
Hang on a second, I want you to take a look at some pictures.
He called police when he recognized the man's face from the newspaper. To be sure, the detective showed the flagman a photo lineup.
Take a look at 6 here. See if
It included a mugshot of O'Neill alongside 5 others. The flagman picked out O'Neill immediately. As investigators continued the hunt, a Washington state trooper spotted a tan Chrysler with Montana tags on the afternoon of March 30th. The same day the flagman had seen O'Neill. It had been abandoned on the side of Interstate 5, about 50 miles north of Pierce County, 2 days after Robin's disappearance. Unaware of the ongoing investigation, the officer found nothing suspicious about the car. He followed proper procedure by calling in the license plate and vehicle description. A communications officer entered the tag number into a database. The information should have triggered the NCIC listing on O'Neill and his vehicle. It did not. She had mistakenly typed the abbreviation MO for the state of Missouri instead of MT for Montana. The trooper on Highway 5 was still unaware that this was the very car Darren D. O'Neill had been driving following Robin Smith's disappearance. Investigators' best clue was about to be towed to the impound lot. On March 30th, 1987, a Washington state trooper found a tan Chrysler with Montana tags 50 miles east of Tacoma. Misinformed by his communications officer, the trooper was unaware that Darren D. O'Neill, the man wanted in connection with the disappearance of Robin Smith, had abandoned the car. The vehicle was towed to an impound lot for future sale. A few days later, the local paper ran an article about Robin Smith's abduction. The story described O'Neill's car. It sounded similar to a Chrysler the tow truck operator had recently impounded. He checked the make, model, and license plate. They matched. He quickly notified police. Detectives ran a check of the Chrysler's vehicle ID number. A man calling himself Zebulon McCranahan was reported to have stolen it from an Idaho residence in 1986. Wilson immediately remembered the peculiar name from an ID card he'd found at O'Neill's home. It was one of the suspect's aliases. At the Pierce County West Precinct garage, detectives and evidence technicians processed the Chrysler. They hoped to find some trace evidence linking O'Neill or Robin to the car. While technicians searched the interior, the detectives moved to the trunk. They found a large quantity of dried blood. Detectives also found a blood-stained lavender jacket. Mrs. Smith later identified the garment as Robin's. They also recovered teeth, bone chips, and a clump of hair. O'Neill's fingerprints on empty beer cans pointed to his involvement. If Detective Wilson had held out some slim hope that Robin was still alive, it was now gone.
We felt now that we probably had a homicide on our hands by the way the type of blood that was found in the trunk and the amount of blood that was found. And so we started focusing on Darren as a homicide suspect. At this point in time, the whole tone of the investigation started changing.
But to charge O'Neill with murder, examiners at the Washington State Forensics Lab first needed to confirm that the hair and bone fragments belonged to Robin Smith. Pierce County sheriffs requested Robin's dental records and blood type sent to the lab. But there was a problem. Robin had not been to the dentist since childhood. She also had never documented her blood type. Since a definitive match with known samples could not be made, murder charges could not be filed. As the hunt for suspected killer Darren D. O'Neill ground to an abrupt halt, 120 miles to the north, Detective Carlotta Jarrett of the Bellingham, Washington Police Department was working on a similar case. Wendy Aughy, a 28-year-old single mother, was reported missing when she failed to pick up her daughter. Wendy had a date the evening of April 24th, 1987. She left her daughter with the child's grandmother. When Wendy failed to return her call, the grandmother drove over to her house to find the little girl's favorite pillow. On Wendy's bed, she found bloodstains and called the police. Detective Jarrett obtained a warrant to search the house. Wendy's car, a red Ford Torino, was missing. The front door to Wendy's house had been left unlocked. Her wallet and keys were missing. In the bedroom, Detective Jarrett found evidence of a brutal attack.
There was bodily fluids in the bed, and there was a great amount of pooled blood underneath that pillow, which had seeped to the mattress below. There was low to medium impact velocity blood spatters on a wall, and there were also blood smears on the wall.
Bellingham police retrieved the entire bed as evidence. On the headboard, they found more of Wendy's blood, along with 2 blonde hairs that did not belong to the missing woman. Police also recovered an acrylic fingernail. Wendy's friends told police that she had worn acrylic nails on her date with a man named Michael Johnson. Wendy had met Johnson earlier that afternoon on her lunch break. He was the new bartender at La Paloma restaurant. Detective Jarrett checked the restaurant for leads.
I contacted the owner to see if she'd filled out an employment application for Mr. Johnson, and the only thing she had was a placemat that he had written some information on. She gave that placemat to me, and we did and processed it for fingerprints.
While the detective waited for results, she visited a local mission which the bartender had listed on the placemat as his residence. Detective Jarrett spoke to the desk clerk at the mission, who remembered the day Johnson checked out.
He had seen Mr. Johnson at the mission at 7:30 in the morning on the day after that Wendy Aughy had a date with him. And at that time, he was wearing black slacks, a vest, a white shirt, and a tie, and told him he was going to work. He also said he had met a lady and he was going to move in with her. This person also said that Mr. Johnson was driving a red Torino and drove away in it. Previous to this point, he'd had no vehicle.
On May 4th, 1987, Jarrett received a phone call from police in Eugene, Oregon. They had found Wendy's car, a red Ford Torino, abandoned in the parking lot of a tavern. Inside, police recovered fingerprints that matched the fingerprints found on the placemat. A check through the automated fingerprint identification system revealed that the prints belonged to Darren D. O'Neill, the man wanted for the suspected murder of Robin Smith. Detective Jarrett contacted authorities in Pierce County, 120 miles south of Bellingham. They quickly realized there were striking similarities in both cases.
Since we were convinced that Darren O'Neill was responsible for Robin Smith's death, and we also felt that he was responsible for Wendy Aughy's disappearance and possible death, we felt that the rest of the people in the country were also at great risk from Darren O'Neill.
Pierce County deputies called in the FBI to assist in the hunt. Former Special Agent Del Oros of the FBI's Tacoma Resident Agency was assigned the case.
At that point, we knew we were dealing with an individual who was extremely mobile and extremely dangerous. He had the history of a violent sexual predator, and now he had the current tag or label of a murderer.
Since Wendy and Robin's bodies were still missing, formal murder charges were not filed. Sexual assault charges against O'Neill were still pending in Colorado. The FBI opened a federal case against the fugitive for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Still, O'Neill managed to stay one step ahead. No one knew where the suspected serial killer fled after he left Oregon. And authorities still had no murder case unless they found the bodies of the missing women. In May 1987, evidence pointed to the brutal slaying of 2 innocent women in Washington state. The FBI and local police launched a media campaign to flush out suspected killer Darren D. O'Neill. Dozens of agents fanned out to investigate sightings all over the Pacific Northwest.
Got a call, you seen the guy that we're looking for? Yes.
O'Neill was spotted hitchhiking at truck stops north and south of Seattle.
He wasn't very fat. This is the guy.
One trucker gave O'Neill a ride on May 23rd. He claimed his passenger thanked him for the ride because the cops were after him. The trucker pulled off the highway a short time later and left O'Neill just a few miles outside the city. Special Agent Del Oros recalled that even as leads came in, the hunt for the elusive killer did not get any easier.
The months immediately following the disappearance of Robin Smith and Wendy Ahi were extremely frustrating. Because of O'Neill's change in facial appearance, a change in weight, people were consistently telling us that the pictures that we were showing of O'Neill were actually 2 different people. Well, they weren't.
The FBI focused on places the drifter might blend in. Because O'Neill was constantly on the move, agents questioned travelers at local bus and train stations. They hoped someone had spotted O'Neill and would remember his distinctive tattoos. Even when they found people who had seen the fugitive, it was always too late. O'Neill was comfortable in the ever-changing world of transients and drifters, where people could easily disappear forever.
It wasn't as though we were going to find Darren O'Neill at the local Ramada Inn. It forced us to take a hard look at the reality of having to search for him in places where he would blend in very, very easily. By way of example, we looked in bus stops, homeless shelters, day labor camps. He was certainly not anyone who was going to be holding a 9-to-5 job, which really did increase the difficulty in trying to find him as the pursuit went on through the subsequent months.
While agents and detectives continued to pursue hundreds of mostly false sightings, detectives were called to the rural area surrounding Crystal Mountain, just east of Washington State's Mount Rainier. Hikers had reported finding what appeared to be human remains. The location was close to where a flagman had seen O'Neill's car about a month earlier, not long after Robin Smith's disappearance. Just inside the wood line, officers spotted a jawbone and a skull. Each item was carefully flagged before it was retrieved. As Stout and Wilson surveyed the crime scene, they wondered whether the remains were Robin's. Investigators also found other bones scattered in the vicinity. Folded clothing was found hidden in the base of a nearby tree. It matched the description of the outfit Robin had worn to the party. They also recovered a wallet. Inside, they found Robin Smith's driver's license. Investigators fanned out to cover a wide area. Their persistence paid off. They found a claw hammer with markings similar to the one reported missing by one of O'Neill's former employers. Detectives also suspected it was the murder weapon. The Pierce County medical examiner agreed. A careful examination of the remains revealed that Robin had probably died as the result of blunt force trauma to the head. Darren D. O'Neill was charged with first-degree murder.
Once the remains of Robin Smith were found, we certainly had the confirmation that a murder had occurred. And by virtue of that murder, the Washington federal authorities then issued their own separate and second investigation. They issued another unlawful flight to avoid prosecution warrant for him.
The FBI was more determined than ever to get their hands on the man responsible for this heinous crime. By June of 1987, the FBI had issued 2 federal warrants for the arrest of suspected serial killer Darren D. O'Neill, still on the loose in the Pacific Northwest. The remains of one woman had been recovered close to Mount Rainier. The second woman was still missing and presumed dead. Since O'Neill was last known to be in Eugene, Oregon, Special Agent Michael Elsey of the FBI's Portland field office was called in.
Knowing that he was a sexual predator, I went and checked with the local police agencies with some of their sexual assault cases to see if his MO fit any of, or description or anything fit any of their pending cases.
Special Agent O'Donnell, Detective Smith.
It meant hundreds of man-hours, but agents refused to simply wait for another sighting or another victim. Dozens of agents met with detectives in districts across the region to try to link O'Neill to outstanding sexual assault cases. The search was complicated by the fact that O'Neill looked very different in each of his mugshots. Most often, the agents left empty-handed. Frustrated and out of leads, agents continued to wade through hundreds of old case files. With a dangerous predator on the prowl, agents had to exhaust every possibility. An agent met with police detective Bill Carter in Portland. As he had done a dozen times before, the agent compared O'Neill's picture to sketches of sexual predators. One sketch stood out. It bore a strong resemblance to the fugitive. A 14-year-old girl named Heidi Lang had provided the drawing 5 months earlier when she filed rape charges against her unknown attacker. From the police report, her description of the crime sounded eerily similar to O'Neill's other assaults.
From looking at the photos of Mr. O'Neill, especially when he had a beard and the glasses, I saw that there was quite a bit of resemblance between the two, and the method and MO were similar as well. Luckily, he did not kill Miss Lang, as he had other subjects.
Agent Elsey wanted to speak with Heidi Lang as soon as possible. Detective Carter arranged a meeting between the young girl and the FBI.
12 o'clock, a little bit after.
With her mother by her side, she told the story from the beginning. At around midnight on January 17, 1987, 2 months before Robin Smith disappeared, Heidi broke her mother's curfew and walked to the nearby convenience store to get a soda. It was a tough part of town. The young girl had walked it many times before, but never this late at night. As she crossed an overpass leading to the store, a trucker called to her from his parked rig. She ignored him and walked on. It only took her a few minutes to get the soda. Then she started back home. She walked as quickly as she could to get back before her mother knew she had left. Heidi told investigators that as she approached the overpass, the man and the truck were gone. But on the other side of the overpass, the trucker jumped out of the bushes and grabbed her.
Get in the truck. Get in the truck. Get in.
He forced her down an embankment at knife point and shoved her into his semi parked at the side of the highway. Years later, Heidi recalls that she believed her young life was over.
The first thing I noticed is how dangerous he was. I felt that he had every intention of killing me. There was no question in my mind.
Get him back.
He threw her into the sleeper compartment of his truck. She was terrified, with no idea where he might take her or what he might do.
He threatened to make me a whore, sell me to pimps. He was gonna cut me open if I tried finding what was going to keep from angering this man. I had to behave like I was just holding conversation with him, and at the same time learn what I could about him.
Despite Heidi's best efforts, the trucker climbed into the sleeper compartment and repeatedly raped the 14-year-old for 4 hours.
And he did not like to think of you as a woman. That brought him to violence. I had to keep him talking, mostly to keep his mind off other things. And I tried my best to give him the impression that I was insignificant. And I was just there to be there with him. And it wouldn't mean anything if he let me go.
Heidi's insight and courage paid off. After suffering hours of abuse, her tormentor let her go. She ran until she reached a truck stop. She asked an employee for a ride home. After all she'd been through, Heidi bravely submitted to a rape test. This provided investigators with samples of the rapist's semen, though no match could be made until the suspect was in custody.
Identify the man. Take a look at these, please.
When Heidi finished her story, Detective Carter showed her a number of photos of O'Neill and some similar-looking men.
It was amazing that he was in it, and I did see him, and I picked him out. I really did not expect to see him in them. I hadn't really heard anything since I had given the sketch.
Seeing her attacker's face brought the memories flooding back, but she never hesitated to press charges. Heidi was determined to face her rapist and put him behind bars.
I think that she wanted to see that this person did not do that to anyone else ever again. And so it showed very much strengthened her character, and especially at the age of 14, being able to be so descriptive in the events that occurred, the description of the subject and him, that kind of got us to the path where we were.
Agent Elsey called the Tacoma office. They finally had a witness to testify against O'Neill.
He had run other places,
but they still had to find him. Agent Del Oros called FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. to request additional assistance. On June 18, 1987, Darren D. O'Neill's name was placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. The case was now a priority for every FBI office in the country. Agents had to find O'Neill before he could strike again. In June of 1987, suspected serial killer Darren D. O'Neill was added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list.
Hey, here's what I want you to do.
Special Agent Del Oros was in charge of the case. He convinced the FBI's Fugitive Publicity Unit in Washington, D.C. that Darren D. O'Neill fit the list's criteria.
The Bureau's determination as to who goes on to the top 10 wanted list is a function of a lot of different factors. Primarily, it's the protection of the community. Secondarily, it has to do with the ability of those individuals to be mobile, to transport themselves across interstate lines, so effectively going from state to state.
With nationwide publicity, the manhunt for O'Neill was relentless. Countless sightings were reported in several states. O'Neill was most often spotted in bars and taverns in the Northwest.
Looking for a guy may have been seen around here.
Investigators followed up on dozens of leads, only to find witnesses with vague descriptions of the fugitive. Nobody knew of his whereabouts.
Anything noticeable about his appearance?
Agents were left with little to go on.
Okay, thank you very much.
So we had a long stretch of time when the clues were drying up. The leads from other agents were not producing any form of immediate return. We were going back and to the same people, consistently re-interviewing the family, friends. We were reaching out as far as going to prior instructors, prior employers, looking for some type of clue that would tell us or show us a pattern of his activity and his mobility across the country.
7 months later, on February 3rd, 1988, agents discovered that O'Neill had made his way to Lakeland, Florida. He was spotted by a Lakeland police officer conducting what appeared to be a drug deal.
Got some good stuff. You got the money?
The officer was unaware that O'Neill was wanted for murder. O'Neill noticed the cop but did nothing. The officer turned his car around to investigate. When the cruiser pulled past the stopped car, O'Neill pulled up and asked for directions, pretending he was lost. The officer asked him to pull over. Instead, O'Neill took off. The officer followed, calling in the Louisiana tags on O'Neill's car as he drove. O'Neill tried to lose him, zigzagging through the streets of Lakeland. When their car jumped a curb, the suspects ran.
On foot, chasing a white male.
The officer pursued on foot and eventually caught them all.
Your car, where you at with your car?
O'Neill was extradited to Louisiana when police learned the car he'd been driving was reported stolen from that state. When asked, O'Neill told police his name was Zon Mayu.
A clerk who was working nights compared the fingerprints of the individual that she knew as Jean Mailloux to the list of fingerprints associated with FBI top 10 wanted fugitives, and found that the individual that she knew as Jean Mailloux was the individual that we knew as Darren O'Neill.
O'Neill was extradited to Washington State to face charges. But state prosecutors knew their cases were weak. Since Wendy Augie's body was never recovered, O'Neill could not be charged with her murder. The Robin Smith case was stronger, but lacked definitive forensic identification. It would be difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the body found in the woods was Robin Smith's. Despite the evidentiary obstacles, prosecutors moved ahead with the Robin Smith case. They would take their chances with a jury. O'Neill and his attorney would never let the case get that far. In a Pierce County court on January 4th, 1989, O'Neill pled guilty to first-degree murder in the killing of Robin Smith. Detective Wilson knew there was an ulterior motive behind the plea.
The court system in the state of Washington at that time was, if a person was convicted of first-degree murder, but there was a loophole in there. If you pled guilty to the charge, the maximum time you got was 333 months.
The family of Robin Smith was devastated. Even without parole, O'Neill would be free well before the end of his natural life. The killers still face charges in Portland, Oregon for the kidnapping and rape of 14-year-old Heidi Lang. If convicted, O'Neill would be put away for life. But prosecutors had a problem. Deputy District Attorney Charles Sparks recalls that the rape kit Heidi had provided at the time of her assault would not be admissible for a comparison with O'Neill.
There was a sexual assault kit that included vaginal swabs that were taken, and that had molded because of the way these things were stored back then, and it was not usable. And DNA evidence would have been very helpful, but we just didn't have it.
On May 16, 1990, as O'Neill's trial began, prosecutors knew their only chance was to put Heidi on the witness stand to face her attacker. It would be traumatic for her, but it was their best hope for putting O'Neill behind bars for good.
So it was very difficult for me to testify at the trial. It was even more difficult to look at him face to face. It was very frightening, very scary experience. First of all, at this point, I had promised this man that I wouldn't tell anybody what happened. And this is a man who had no qualms about going after anybody, even just a girl walking down the street in the middle of the night. I knew I had to put him away, or I was as good as dead. That's the way I view it.
From here today, could you point to that man?
Heidi pointed out the man who had kidnapped and raped her, sitting sullenly just a few yards in front of her. Her testimony was enough to convict O'Neill. The jury found him guilty on all 16 counts of kidnapping and rape. Under Oregon law, he was sentenced to 135 years in prison. Darren D. O'Neill is serving his first sentence of 27 years at a Washington State penitentiary. He will then be transferred to Oregon to spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Once he was convicted, I was able to put a lot of this in the past. I was able to put it away. And that was most important to me. That's the most, I don't think I would have ever gotten over this if we hadn't put him away.
For Agent Oros, though he has since left the FBI to serve as Deputy District Attorney in Sacramento, California, the case remains fresh in his mind.
Well, to this very day, I still have the wanted flyer for Darren O'Neill hanging in my office here at the District Attorney's office. He, even on the wall, is a constant reminder of the dangers that face each and every one of us as we go out on the street. I'm particularly aware of the fact that he represents a significant danger to the women in society. He's an individual that was a cold, calculated murder, and he reaffirms for me that I'm in a profession that matters, and that every day when I go into court, I'm there to make a difference.